nominate Honorable Tajuddin Abbas.
I so second.
I rise to humbly accept the nomination.
Is hereby declared the winner and returned elected as the Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Over 70,000 inmates in the country face inadequate facility.
Lawmakers tax federal government on the decongestion of correctional centers.
While the women were fetching the firewood, they were surrounded by the insurgents in Bulabultie village in the western part of Ngala town.
And House reacts to the abduction of female IDPs in Borno State, promises rescue measures. This is House Tickets, your window into the activities of the House of Representatives, Federal Republic of Nigeria. My name is Dihelia Mamza. The program today will bring you highlights of the third edition of the sectorial debate organized by the House during plenary. The sector under scrutiny was the agricultural sector. In attendance were the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, the Comptroller General of the Nigeria Customs Service, the Managing Director NIRSAL, as well as the Executive Secretary of the National Agric Development Fund. They gave insights into the current economic realities. All of this, as well as a summary of what transpired during plenary in the last 1 week, make up this episode of House Ticket. Please stay tuned for details.
The House will pay priority attention to participatory budgeting process and delivery, law reform, electoral reform, women's participation and inclusion in governance, among others.
Thank you for staying tuned. The third edition of the sectorial debate of the House of Representatives held on Tuesday, 5th March 2024. The focus, as I mentioned earlier, is the agricultural sector as the House interacted with top government officials in the sector, namely the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Senator Abubakar Kari, Minister of State for Agriculture and Food Security, Senator Aliyu Sabi Abdullahi, Comptroller General of the Nigeria Customs Service, Adewale Bashiru Adeniyi, Managing Director of the Nigerian Incentive-Based Risk Sharing System for Agricultural Lending, NIRSAL, Abbas Umar Masanawa, as well as the Executive Secretary of the National Agric Development Fund, Muhammad Ibrahim.
The growing concern surrounding food insecurity.
In his remarks, Deputy Speaker of the House, Right Honorable Benjamin Okeze Kalu, who presided over the session, stated that food inflation remains a persistent challenge, which has reached a staggering 35.41% as of January 2024. This, he said, places immense burden on the working population, with 90% allocating a staggering 60% of their income to meet their basic food needs.
Our collective effort must focus on addressing both demand and supply factors along with the persistent challenge of food price inflation. Through thorough analysis, I have identified 4 critical levers for improving food security: increasing per capita consumption, raising production yield, curbing food price inflation, and reducing reliance on food import. Today, we are going to have a conversation that will be championed by you, where you will express yourself on the questions coming from the constituents, which the people in charge of this sector will be given opportunity to address.
Right Honorable Benjamin Kalu also emphasized the imperativeness of drawing insight from other countries to inform strategies and initiatives in Nigeria. In his presentation, the Minister of Agriculture and Food Security, Senator Abubakar Kyari, informed the House that the present food shortage currently experienced in the country is as a result of insecurity, persistent farmers-herders clashes, COVID-19 pandemic, smuggling of food across the borders, as well as the Naira redesign policy. As a measure to reverse the shortage, the ministry is boosting dry season farming.
Maize is not as much as rice in the dry season, but we intend to cultivate about 55,000 hectares, which will impact 110,000 farmers and a yield of 220,000 metric tons. Cassava also is 35,000 hectares with 70,000 farmers and a yield of 525,000 tons. But for immediate plans that we have in our reserve, what we met was 53,000 metric tons of assorted grains. We have asked and gotten approval by Mr. President to distribute 42,000. We have remaining of 11,000 is for strategic storage, simply because you have to have a threshold for any, but God forbid, any eventuality that may befall in this country. So we have 42,000 that is in the process of being bagged, and also the NEMA is handling and the office of the NSA are handling the distribution, and they are mapping out the matrix of the vulnerability persons across the country.
The minister then called on the lawmakers to invest in the agricultural sector. According to the Comptroller General of the Nigeria Customs Service, Adewale Adeniyi, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu gave a directive about food items seized at the borders of the country.
President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has directed that we should dispose of this item through direct sales to vulnerable Nigerians. We have kicked off this exercise in some parts of the country, and we believe that very soon we will get to other parts, taking our experience from the lessons that we have learned from the places where we have done it. And in terms of the food that are destined for exports that were arrested at the border stations, the President has directed that instead of seizing those items, we should find a way of getting those items back into the local markets, so that it will also have some kind of, exert some kind of pressure on the price to help to drive down their prices.
Speaking earlier, the Managing Director of NIRSAL, Abbas Umar Masanawa, also informed the House that NIRSAL is a 75 billion non-bank financial institution that is owned by the CBN to circulate the flow of affordable finance to the agricultural sector.
Our role as NIRSAL is to see how we can be able to stimulate the flow of investment into that agri-space. So with de-risk agriculture, we don't provide low-interest agriculture, but we de-risk it in the sense that we stimulate. We go to the private sector. We want them to de-risk agriculture for them, so they can be able to lend to agriculture. And because of that, in the past few years that we have been in operation, over 200 billion have been put from private sector into the agri space.
On his part, the Executive Secretary of the National Agric Development Fund, Mohammed Ibrahim, stated that the fund is to provide support in the form of finance for the development of agriculture in Nigeria.
In the last 3 months since we've been in office, we have tried to see that we have a 5-year strategy in place. We've been in the development of our roadmap that will help us catalyze investment into this sector. Some of the things we have done include going on a very intensive stakeholder engagement. We are presently in 3 committees with the Development Finance Department, along with NIRSAL, and again from the ministry, again with NIRSAL, BOI and NAIC, so that we have a unified approach towards funding agriculture in this country.
You talked about insecurity.
After their presentations, lawmakers took turns to ask the stakeholders questions.
You gave a litany of reasons why we are in our current state of food insecurity. You talked about insecurity, you talked about COVID, and you also talked about the rising level of the sea and the Naira redesigned policy of the central bank as factors that actually contributed to the food crisis that we have today. The question I want to ask is this. COVID started in 2020 and to a large extent ended in 2020. What were the recovery measures that were put in place for the 8 years that President Buhari was in power? Insecurity was there or is still there till today. What are we doing about insecurity in this country? Because if you don't have security, farmers will not feel free to go and harvest or plant their crops.
We are doing a lot, and in terms of insecurity, like you asked, Mr. President has given the go-ahead for the revampment of the forest rangers and also the agro rangers. Just last week, I had interaction with the Commandant General of the Nigerian Civil Defense Corps on the need to reactivate and in collaboration with the states, the issue of the agro rangers. So that is in the advanced stage of development.
The President did directed, just as you've told us here, that all the food items seized be sold to the vulnerables at a very minimal price. And you've told us you've started in Lagos. You have all your zonal directors or DGs. You have in Kano, you have in Kaduna, you have in Akwa Ibom, all the states. You've seized all these food items. What stops you from giving directives simultaneously that they be sold? One wait for Lagos to finish before you come to Akwa Ibom, before you go to Abia State, before you go to Kaduna. We are still creating more problem. This bureaucratic bottleneck is the cause of why Nigerians are suffering. I believe if the same way you are selling Lagos, Akwa Ibom is also selling, Kaduna is selling, Imo is selling, it will reduce this food scarcity.
The fact that we did not do it simultaneously. You want to appreciate the fact that that operation is a very, very tasking one because it happened, or it was supposed to happen in all the places where we had our key operations. We felt that we needed to put in a plan, run it, and take some learnings from what we did in the first instance. And in Lagos, for example, we learned that it was not just enough for you to distribute 20,000 bags of rice. That even if you distribute 1 million, when the last bag, when you are distributing it, you need an exit plan to explain to so many other people who are waiting to collect bags of rice.
Having been on the border town for 6 decades now, I can categorically say some of your men, they hinder free movement of goods and services on the border communities. I don't know what you are doing in order to improve the relationship between the border communities and the customs services in order to ease free movement of goods and services within the country.
As part of the submissions, budget submission we made for 2024, as approved that we undertake projects, big projects that speaks to issue of community social responsibilities in 6 key border stations spread all over the country. Now, in terms of whether those borders the closure are discriminatory, no, they are not discriminatory. We were operating within very clear directives given to us.
I'm concerned about access to credit facilities by farmers, both the small farmers
and the large-scale farmers. I've interacted with NIRSAL before, and I know how cumbersome your processes are. If they are frustrating to people even in our own cadre, I wonder what the small, farm holders should be going through. How do you intend to simplify the processes so that we can have more access to funding for farmers? It is one of the germane issues affecting production in Nigeria.
Ours is to facilitate flow of investment and finance. We're not actually giving out money, but with risk. So we encourage the the banks and other financial institutions to lend to agriculture. So we have been doing a lot. We have been going around to see how we can be able to stimulate that, to see how we can be able to encourage the private sector to be able to lend more to agriculture. And we have been doing a lot. Last year alone, we have done quite a lot in terms of making sure that smallholder farmers, even largeholder farmers, are having access to credit.
We'll take a short break here, and when we return, legislative business of the House, as well as bills, reports, and motions coming your way. Don't go away. The program is still House Tickets, coming to you on the NTA Parliament. Providing a living wage for Nigerian workers and the abduction of women in an IDP camp are some of the issues raised via motions in the week under review. For highlights of these motions as well as bills, let's take our next report from our studio. Keep watching.
Honor and glory, so help me God.
I have a matter of urgent national importance.
Representative Billy Famous Osawaru on Tuesday, 5th March 2024, moved a matter of urgent public importance on the need to urgently avert the looming calamity and the pro-security in a community in Edo State.
The good people of Igbanka community in Orion local government of Edo State are recently beginning to know no peace as they are currently under kidnappers' siege. Among on daily basis are stories of willful attacks, kidnapping, and sacking of villagers abound. Mr. Speaker, the House is worried that in a space of 1 week, specifically between the 7th and 11th of February 2024, Igbanka community has witnessed 2 incidents by unknown gunmen in military uniform, abducting over 20 villagers in total, while some persons suffer various degrees of injuries during the attacks.
His prayers were for the House to urge the IGP to contain the insecurity in the community and prevent it from escalating further. Urge the heads of security agencies to step up security surveillance of the community to ensure lives and properties of the citizens are protected. Mandate the Committee on National Security and Intelligence to ensure compliance and report back in 4 weeks for further legislative action. The motion was voted on and adopted.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to inform this Honorable House.
Still on matters of urgent public importance, Representative Zainab Gimba on Thursday, 7th March 2024, moved a motion on the abduction of dozens of women and children in IDP camps in Ngala local government area of Borno State by Boko Haram insurgents.
The abduction took place last Sunday, the 3rd, when the women went to fetch firewood in the bush for domestic and commercial purposes. Further notes that while the women were fetching the firewood, they were surrounded by the insurgents in Bulabulchie village in the western part of Ngala town. Again notes that the insurgents freed the old age but abducted about almost 300 evil young girls and boys. Aware that most of the abducted women were from Babban Sansani and some from Zulum and Arabic camps.
Representative Gimba urged the security personnel deployed to the camp to intensify vigilance in and around the camp. Tasked all security agencies to rescue all abducted victims. Further urged NEMA to take necessary measures to ensure residents of the camp are adequately fed and mandate the Committee on Disaster Preparedness on IDPs and refugees to ensure compliance. Moving on, the House adopted and passed several motions on the order paper, one of which was on the need to provide a living wage for workers in Nigeria.
Presently, no laborer can live in Nigeria with a wage of less than 100,000 naira. Concern that, according to the World Bank report, low purchasing power in the country occasioned by a high inflationary rate has led to an increase in poverty across the country. Also recall that the Right Honorable Speaker of the House of Representatives had on September 29, 2003, at the State Banquet in Abuja, often that it is only a living wage that can ameliorate the insecurity and corruption pervading the country. Worried that unless very immediate and pragmatic steps are taken to improve the income of Nigerians, more Nigerians will go down the economic line, with the poor population increasing.
The resolutions taken were to mandate the Committee on Labor, Employment and Productivity to explore ways to pay living wages to Nigerian workers at rates that align with economic realities and transmit the resolution to the Senate for concurrence.
Those in support of this amendment,
the motion
say
was
aye.
voted on, amended and referred to the House Committee on Finance, National Planning as well as that on Labor, Employment and Productivity.
The ayes have it.
I rise to move a motion.
Another motion that was voted and adopted was a call to decongest Nigerian correctional services.
Over 70,000 inmates in the country face inadequate facility despite the government effort, and some have not been charged with criminal cases, while some are unable to pay the fines imposed by the courts despite having their cases determined. It disturbed that by the Nigeria criminal justice system is plagued by the few with the case often lingering without a resolution for years, thus overcrowding the correction centers in various geopolitical zones. Also disturbed that the data system revealed that federal offenders comprise the less than 10% in the correction system, inmates leaving over 90% to the state offenders.
The motion was voted on, amended and referred to the House Committee on Justice as well as that on Interior with the following resolutions. Urge the federal and state governments to provide comprehensive reforms of the country's correctional system, including modernizing custodial centers, building new facilities, and redesigning the bail system. Propose legislations to allocate time for the speedy dispensation of justice and reduce the number of inmates awaiting trial. Examine the role of the federal and state governments in the correction of inmates. Propose sustainable, efficient solutions to address the congestion in 244 jails nationwide and the effective implementation of non-custodial measures. Devise and promote effective reformation, rehabilitation and reintegration of inmates, to utilize its prerogative of mercy to grant amnesty to deserving inmates. The House also resolved to urge the Federal Ministry of Justice to prevent delays in justice dispensation and enhancing the process of meeting bail conditions, and to further urge the security agencies to avoid arbitrary arrests. As for bills, the House last week took the second reading of a bill titled A Bill for an Act to Amend the Flag and Coats of Arms Act, Cap F30, Laws of the Federation of Nigeria 2004, to regulate, display and use national flags and for related matters. It was sponsored by Representative Sada Soli.
There was a fine in the misuse of the flag. At that time, the fine was 100 naira. If you equate 100 naira to an act of mutilating or misuse of our national flag, I think it's 0 to nothing. So that's the amendment. I'm trying to jack up the amendment from 100 naira to about 100,000 naira.
Those in support of this motion say aye.
The bill was voted on, approved and referred to the House Committee on Interior.
Just give us
The following bills were considered at third reading. A bill for an act to provide for the establishment of Federal College of Nursing and Midwifery, Ado-Ekiti, Ekiti State, and for related matters. A bill for an act to establish the Chartered Institute of Mentoring and Life Coaching of Nigeria to be charged with the responsibility for registration, discipline of its members to systemize the practice of mentoring and coaching, and for related matters.
This is where we draw the curtains for this week's edition of House Tickets. Keep a date with us same time next week for another edition of the program. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria and do stay safe.